enrolling a bunch of people who report eating spam. Now, these could be people, for example, in the second study that someone proposed who eat spam at least 3 times a week or something like that. And then what I'd do, I'd follow these people over time, and this pointer moves very slowly. I'd measure some outcomes on these people. And the outcomes are the events that happen in these people's lives that could have been caused by their eating spam periodically or regularly in their diet. And I'd use the same outcomes that you guys had proposed in those 3 study designs. I'd be looking at measures of obesity, maybe measuring body mass index. I know spam is heavy in salt, so therefore I might be measuring blood pressure. Uh, Obesity might lead to diabetes, so I'd be wanting to measure whether they develop diabetes. I'd want to see whether they develop cardiovascular disease. There's a number of outcomes I'd measure on those people. And I'll call them the factual outcomes. Those are things that actually happen to those spam eaters. Now what I need is some idea of how typical those outcomes were. Namely, would they have happened to these people anyway, even if they hadn't eaten spam? Would they still have developed high blood pressure? Would they still have developed diabetes or cardiovascular disease? So now what I'd like to do is put these people into a time machine, if one existed. Bring them back to when I first enrolled them in my study. But now somehow stop them from ever eating spam. Change their lifestyle so they never were a spam consumer. Then I'd follow them the same way I did before. I'd send them questionnaires. I would call them up. I'd check their medical records, whatever I would do. Now I'd see what happens to those people. I'd measure those same outcomes again. Did they develop high blood pressure? Did they develop obesity? Did they develop diabetes, cardiovascular disease? Those would be what we call the counterfactual outcomes. Those are the things that would happen to those people had they not eaten spam. So now what I could do, and to get an idea of the effect of spam, is I could compare the actual outcomes that happened to those spam eaters, the factual outcomes, to what would have happened to those same people under identical situations where everything else is the same, except they never ate spam. Those would be the counterfactual outcomes. If someone actually had developed diabetes, for example, when they were a spam eater, and they didn't develop diabetes when they were not a spam eater, then I could say that that diabetes was caused by eating spam. So the effect of spam eating would be to compare the factual outcomes, what actually happened to these spam eaters, to what these hypothetical counterfactual outcomes would be. What would have happened to those people had they never eaten spam? So that's a great ideal study to think about. But in practice, it's a perfect study because there's no bias or any confounding in the study. Those are terms we'll be talking about in a couple of sessions. I'm comparing everybody to themselves. So everyone's being compared to the same person under 2 different scenarios. One when they were eating spam and one when they were not eating spam. And the outcomes I'm measuring are the same, measured in the exact same way by calling these people up or sending them questionnaires or checking their medical records. So in many ways, this is the ideal perfect study. But the big problem, as you all can figure out right now, is there's no way to measure these counterfactual outcomes. There's no way to put a person into a time machine, bring them back into their early days when they're first deciding whether they wanted to eat spam or never to eat spam, and change them somehow to become a non-spam eater rather than the spam eater. Time machines just don't exist, therefore this ideal study is just not feasible. So what's the solution to this problem? The solution is epidemiology. That's what I'm going to be talking about today and talking about in the next 3 sessions also. One of my colleagues said the only reason we have jobs as epidemiologists is because no one invented a time machine. No one allows us to do these ideal studies. But since we don't have these time machines, what epidemiologists try to do is estimate what would have happened to those spam eaters had they never eaten spam. And the way we do that is we enroll a comparison group, another group of different people, a group of people who never ate spam or ate spam very irregularly, say less than 1 time a week. Look at the factual outcomes from those people and compare them to the actual outcomes of the spam eaters to get some idea of what the estimated effect of spam use is by comparing outcomes in 2 different groups: exposed people who eat spam and non-exposed people who don't eat spam. So that's what we're going to be talking about today in the next 3 sessions, is how we design epidemiologic studies to try to estimate what the effect of spam is. So that brings up the question, what is epidemiology? And to show you another reference to a movie, this is an actor, William Hurt, who I've seen in a number of movies. The one I remember most vividly years ago. Well, William Hurt was interviewed by Time magazine back in May of 2006, and this is just a scanned copy of that one-page interview that was published in Time magazine. One of the questions they asked him is, did you ever think about doing anything else? And the next slide gives you his answer to that question. And Hurt says, I was looking up epidemiologists the other day, and I thought it might have been a great career. It involves so many different skills, and I love that. Well, I don't know if any of you guys ever wanted to be a movie actor, but my job today in the next 3 sessions is try to sell you on epidemiology, sell you on the skills that we epidemiologists use to answer questions like, what's the effect of eating spam? So hopefully we'll develop some future researchers in the group, or maybe we'll take the researchers who currently exist in this group and bring them to one level higher as we go through these sessions. So today, the particular skill that I want to talk about when we talk about these different skills is namely measurement, what epidemiologists do when we try to measure things. And before I get started, let me just do a reality check. If you could just send in a chat to Mona or Erin or something. Am I coming through okay? Do you hear me? It's not that important, I think, that you have to see me. If I were you, I would close that picture down and just make a full screen out of this. But can we do a little video check? So people say you can hear me and see me, great. So let's just move on. And in a little while, I'll ask you another question, how things are coming along, and whether we should take a break or anything like that. But let's just move on then and talk about measurements. And I think epidemiologists use measurement routinely in 2 different ways. First of all, we study outcomes. When we looked at those 3 study designs on your first 3 slides that were sent, all 3 study designs involved taking groups of people, spam eaters and non-spam eaters, and measuring certain outcomes on them. The outcomes were things like their weight, whether they're obese or overweight, their blood pressure, their cholesterol levels. Yeah, making me hungry too, but I'm not a spam person. Okay. And then going a step further, not just measuring